I'm deeply ashamed to admit that for years, I dismissed every single story of a near-death experience as nothing more than an oxygen-deprived hallucination. That certainty wasn't just intellectual, it was a crude, impenetrable shield against the terrifying possibility of something truly beyond. Now, the fragile logic of my disbelief has been utterly shredded by something so undeniably real, it feels like an unwelcome invasion of my very sanity. Dr. Aris was a woman who lived by facts, by the observable and the quantifiable. That's why she was so good at her job, collecting these medically documented near-death experiences. She wasn't looking for miracles, she was looking for patterns. For the neurological anomaly, the shared hallucination, the predictable oxygen deprivation response. She had built her career on the belief that everything, given enough data, could be explained. And for years, the data supported her. The tunnel, the light, the feeling of peace, all neatly filed under subjective experience, possibly cultural conditioning, or the brain's final, flickering defense mechanism. What struck her, my friend said, was not the grand, sweeping narratives. Those were easy to dismiss, or at least compartmentalize. No, it was the small things. The tiny, persistent, impossible details. There was the case of Mrs. Albright, a retired librarian from Vermont, who, while clinically dead for 3 minutes during a coronary bypass, later reported seeing a red sneaker resting on the 4th-floor hospital window ledge outside her operating room. Red, she emphasized, with a frayed white shoelace. Mrs. Albright, of course, was unconscious, her eyes taped shut. And when a maintenance worker was dispatched, a few days later, he found it. Exactly where she described. Then there was the young man, a 20-year-old brought in after a motorcycle accident, who woke up describing a conversation his estranged father had with the attending nurse in the waiting room. A conversation about his father's regret over a fishing trip they never took. The father confirmed it, tearfully. He'd never mentioned it to anyone else. And the young man, by all accounts, had been on the verge of dying in the trauma bay, miles away and medically unresponsive. These weren't isolated incidents. Aris had a folder, a vividly warm, almost radiant gold, tucked away in the deepest part of her file cabinet, labeled Anomalous Correlations. It started thin, with a half-dozen cases. Then a dozen. Then 50. Each new case was like a tiny pinprick in her perfectly constructed worldview. She'd meticulously cross-referenced them, looking for any other commonality. Did they know each other? Same hospital? Same surgeon? Nothing. Just random people, random incidents, scattered across continents and decades. She used to laugh, a dry, brittle sound, when she described this folder. I built my own ghost, didn't I, she'd say. A ghost made of perfectly rational, irrefutable data points. And the worst part, or maybe the most ironic, was that the more she tried to explain it away, the more robust the anomaly became. It was like trying to erase a shadow by shining a brighter light on it, the shadow just got darker, sharper. I don't know if you've ever felt that particular kind of cognitive dissonance where the evidence before you directly refutes the foundation of your entire understanding of reality. It's not just unsettling, it's a physical sensation, like the ground under your feet suddenly isn't where it's supposed to be. Your brain tries to recategorize, to fit it into a known box, but there is no box. And the moment she realized there was no box, that was the real turning point. The real mistake here is thinking that a scientific mind is immune to belief. Dr. Aris wasn't looking for proof of an afterlife, she was looking for patterns that fit her existing framework. She had this quiet confidence, this almost celestial blue aura of certainty, that the universe was a clockwork mechanism, and she was just finding the gears. But these small, impossible details, they weren't gears. They were whispers from another room, heard through a wall that shouldn't have been there. What strikes me at this point is how much harder it is to adjust your framework when you've built your entire identity, your whole reputation, on its rigidity. She wasn't just a researcher, she was the skeptic researcher, the one who would debunk the spiritualists. And then the data started to debunk her. It wasn't a sudden, blinding revelation. No, it was a slow bleed, a quiet accumulation. Each patient file, smelling faintly of old paper and sterile processing, held another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. She'd review them under the cold, focused glow of her desk lamp, late into the night, the silence of the empty office amplifying every rustle of a page. The hospital outside would be dark, its vivid gold lights muted to distant pinpricks in the urban sprawl, but in her office, illuminated by that harsh, truthful light, the world was unraveling, one documented detail at a time. There was one case, my friend told me, that solidified it. A 6-year-old girl named Lily. Diagnosed with a rare heart condition, she'd flatlined for several minutes. When she recovered, she didn't describe tunnels or lights. She described a small, vividly blue bird with a yellow crest, sitting on a branch just outside her hospital room window. Not just any bird, a very specific type of finch, native to a region thousands of miles away, a bird her deceased grandmother had always loved and depicted in the embroidered samplers that hung in Lily's childhood bedroom. Lily had no way of knowing this bird was outside a specific window on the 3rd floor of the hospital. Her family, bewildered, checked. No such bird was there. Yet, the grandmother's embroidery, rediscovered by her parents, was identical. Lily, lacking the cultural frameworks adults possessed, described it with a simple, childlike honesty. She wasn't trying to interpret, she was just reporting. And her report, devoid of adult conceptualizations of heaven or angels, resonated with the precise, impossible details from Mrs. Albright and the motorcycle accident victim. A specific, verifiable, or verifiable as absent from reality yet described, detail. Not a general feeling, but a concrete, sensory input from a place the patient should not have been able to perceive. Actually, wait. That's not quite right. It wasn't just that the bird wasn't there. It was that the window Lily described was in a part of the hospital with no trees outside, just a sheer wall of vivid celestial blue, reflecting the sky. No branch. No bird. Yet she described it with absolute conviction, detailing the twitch of its tail, the way its crest caught the light, as if it were right there. It was the purity of Lily's observation, untainted by adult expectations of what a near-death experience should be, that resonated so deeply with Aris. It became undeniable. She couldn't unknow it. The knowledge lodged itself in her like a shard of glass, constantly reminding her that her map of reality was incomplete. She started seeing the patterns everywhere, not just in her files. She saw them in the strained politeness of her colleagues who still spoke of NDEs as hallucinations, ischemic events, or wish fulfillment. She saw it in the funding proposals that always ended with further research into neurological correlates, never investigation into non-local consciousness. It was a silent agreement, an unspoken pact to maintain the existing framework, because the alternative was simply too vast, too disruptive. The social cost of revising her skeptic position, of even suggesting that these details pointed to something beyond current scientific understanding, would be immense. It would threaten her grants, her reputation, her entire academic standing. Maybe you felt this too. That moment when you realize the accepted narrative, the thing everyone agrees on, is fundamentally flawed, and you're standing there with the proof, but to speak it aloud would be to dismantle your own life. It's an exhaustion that seeps into your bones, a specific kind of weariness from being right about something no one with power will act on. No, she wasn't entirely alone. There was Dr. Chen, a bioethicist from another institution, a man in his late 60s with a kind face and eyes that had seen too much. He was the one who, years ago, had first suggested Aris look at the specificity of recollection rather than just the emotional arc. He believed in strategic justice, in chipping away at the rigid edifice of established thought one meticulously documented fact at a time. He had his own gold folder, Aris suspected, in his own quiet office somewhere. He never explicitly told her what he believed, but his questions, always precise, always gentle, were a constant affirmation. He was a mentor not by instruction, but by subtle, knowing reflection. She remembered a conversation with him, late one evening over lukewarm coffee, the hospital cafeteria a vivid celestial blue under the fluorescent lights. She'd outlined her most compelling cases, the shoe, the conversation, the bird. He listened, nodding slowly, his gaze distant. "And what do you do with this, Aris?" he'd asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "When the truth costs more than the lie that replaced it, what does keeping it change?" She hadn't had an answer then. She still didn't know if she made the right choice. She kept researching. She kept compiling. It became a compulsion. Every new case was another brick in a wall she was building, not to keep something out, but to hold something in, the shattering understanding that the world was far stranger, far more expansive, than she'd ever allowed herself to imagine. Her character flaw, she later admitted to my friend, was mistaking thoroughness for action. She kept researching, even when the research was already complete. The pattern was undeniable. The aggregate was clear. One afternoon, she found herself in the archive, a vast, echoing space where old medical records were stored, their covers a dull blue under the sparse, utilitarian lighting. She was looking for something else entirely, an old paper on oxygen deprivation effects, but her eye caught a faded chart from the 1970s. It was a standard post-op report for a young man who had suffered cardiac arrest during routine surgery. And appended to it, in neat, cursive handwriting, was a nurse's note. Patient describes seeing a small brass elephant figurine on Dr. Miller's desk in his office during clinical death. Dr. Miller's office is 3 floors above and across the main courtyard. The nurse had added, patient insistent. Miller confirmed he had such an object, kept it in a drawer now. Aris stood there, holding that yellowed sheet of paper, the cold air of the archive seeping into her. The brass elephant. Another specific, impossible detail. It was everywhere. It had always been everywhere, woven into the fabric of human experience, dismissed, ignored, pathologized. The framework the culture provided for interpreting the experience was the main obstacle to receiving it. It wasn't that people hadn't reported these things, it was that no one had listened in a way that allowed the pattern to emerge. Most people misunderstand this, but the real heartbreak isn't just discovering an inconvenient truth, it's realizing how deeply ingrained the refusal to see it is. Dr. Aris wasn't battling a lack of evidence, she was battling a lack of imagination, a collective fear of what that evidence implied. And the loneliness of that fight, it's what hollowed her out, my friend said. She was like a miner who found a diamond vein everyone else insisted was just coal. The sheer weight of that secret, of knowing something so fundamentally altering, yet being unable to articulate it in a language the world understood, was crushing. Her private confrontation came not with a grand committee, but with Dr. Alastair Finch, her former thesis advisor, a man whose skepticism was legendary. He'd called her into his brightly lit, aggressively ordered office, the walls adorned with awards that gleamed like warm radiant gold. He'd heard whispers about her Anomalous Correlations folder, about the questions she was starting to ask in hushed tones at conferences. Aris, he'd begun, tapping a pen against his desk, this work of yours. It's intriguing. But you must be careful. We are scientists, not theologians. She'd laid out her findings, calmly, clinically. The shoe. The conversation. Lily's bird. The brass elephant. Each case presented with the same meticulous rigor she applied to every other aspect of her research. She spoke of the cross-cultural consistency, the lack of medical explanation, the startling specificity. She wasn't asking him to believe in an afterlife. She was asking him to acknowledge the data. Finch listened, his expression unchanging, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his jaw the only tell. When she finished, the silence stretched, thick and heavy. Correlation does not imply causation, Aris, he finally said, his voice flat. And anecdotal evidence, however compelling, is not proof. We rely on verifiable, repeatable experiments. But these are verifiable, she'd countered, her voice tight. The shoe was found. The father confirmed the conversation. Lily described a bird that was specific to her grandmother's art, not to her physical environment. The elephant was verified. What more verification do you need? He'd leaned back, a sigh escaping him. Aris, the moment we open the door to such interpretations, we cease to be scientists. We become something else. We lose our authority, our ability to make sense of the world in a way that benefits humanity. She understood then. It wasn't about the evidence. It was about the framework. His fear wasn't of the unknown, it was of the known, if that known broke all the rules. It was a private confrontation that confirmed everything she suspected and changed nothing structurally. She walked out of his office that day, my friend said, feeling as if she'd won a battle, but lost the war. I'm not going to pretend this resolved cleanly. Dr. Aris continued her research, but it became a quieter, more solitary pursuit. The gold folder grew thicker, a testament to her unwavering gaze into the face of something inexplicable. She never published her aggregate findings in a mainstream peer-reviewed journal. She tried, once, submitting a paper that meticulously detailed the cross-cultural, non-local specificities. It was rejected, with comments about lacking a theoretical framework and unscientific speculation. The words were professional, but the message was clear: stay in your lane. What would you have done if you had uncovered a truth that your entire profession was built to deny? She started writing for smaller, fringe publications, connecting with others who had glimpsed the same patterns. They were a scattered network: researchers, medical professionals, even a few former skeptics, all sharing their gold folders, their impossible details. She'd found her community, but it was a community forged in the shadows of the mainstream, a testament to the fact that some truths, even when meticulously documented, simply could not be contained within the existing structure. It was a Pyrrhic victory, perhaps. She had confirmed her findings, but at the cost of her place within the system she had once so firmly believed in. The exhaustion, my friend observed, was palpable, a weariness that went beyond mere fatigue. It was the exhaustion of seeing clearly in a world that insisted on blurred lines. She still collected the cases, the paper files meticulously organized, stacked neatly on her desk. The vivid celestial blue of the patient intake forms a stark contrast to the occasional warm radiant gold of a child's crayon drawing sent in with a letter. Each folder contained a life, a moment, a truth whispered from beyond the veil of understanding. And each one contributed to the quiet, insistent hum of a reality far more complex than we are typically allowed to acknowledge. That gold folder, the one she kept tucked away, a private testament to an inconvenient truth, I often wonder what she saw when she looked at it. Not just the files, the data, but the collective weight of human experience it represented, experiences that had no name, no category, in the language of her chosen profession. It was a container for the uncontainable, a silent accusation against the comfortable lies we tell ourselves to keep the world manageable. And she carried it, day after day, not with pride, but with the quiet, devastating knowledge that she couldn't unknow what she had found, and that knowledge had cost her everything she thought she was. I guess the real question is, when you uncover something like that, what exactly is it that you win? What is it you lose? I'm not sure she ever figured that out. Closing commentary. The image of Dr. Aris, hunched over her desk, illuminated by that cold, focused light, with the stack of patient files, each containing a tiny, impossible detail, is what really sticks with me from her story. It's not about the NDEs themselves, not really. It's about that specific kind of internal conflict, the quiet battle between what you know to be true and what the world is willing to accept. I feel for Dr. Aris because she wasn't some new age believer, she was a rigorous scientist whose own method betrayed her existing framework. She had to choose between intellectual honesty and professional acceptance, and that's a choice I think many people face in different ways throughout their lives. It makes you wonder how many other inconvenient truths are out there, meticulously documented in gold folders, simply waiting for a world ready to listen. Dr. Aris ultimately chose intellectual honesty over professional acceptance, filling that gold folder even as it cost her everything. What's the one truth you've encountered that, if documented in your own gold folder, you couldn't possibly ignore, no matter the consequences? If you feel that quiet hum of a reality far more complex than we're typically allowed to acknowledge, and you're drawn to stories of inconvenient truths, then you belong here with us. If you know someone who's grappling with their own gold folder of truths too inconvenient for the mainstream, send them this. It might just validate their own quiet battle of seeing clearly in a world of blurred lines. If you found your own gold folder that challenged everything you knew, would you risk everything to share that inconvenient truth, or keep it hidden for the sake of acceptance? I want to know. If this story made you feel the heavy weight of that internal conflict, of knowing a truth the world isn't ready for, the like button is right there. If you're someone who understands the quiet, devastating cost of knowing an inconvenient truth, and you're always seeking what lies beyond the comfortable lies, this channel is for you.